World War II. It's the most documented conflict in human history, a story we think we know inside and out. But what if I told you that beneath the headlines and the famous battles, there are stories so incredible, so astonishing, they sound like they've been pulled straight from a Hollywood script. Today, we're digging deep into the archives to uncover the unbelievable WW2 facts you never knew. From secret super weapons that could have changed the course of the war to phantom armies that tricked the enemy. These are the hidden stories that illuminate the true complexity and audacity of that global conflict. Our first story takes us to the final, desperate years of the war on the Western Front. As Allied forces pushed towards Germany, Hitler's engineers were frantically working on a new terror weapon. It wasn't a rocket or a jet. It was a gun. But not just any gun. This was the V3, the supergun, a colossal piece of artillery designed to bombard London from hundreds of miles away. Deep within occupied France, imagine a cannon so massive its barrels stretch over 400 feet long. The V3 wasn't a conventional cannon. It used a revolutionary multi-charge system. As a shell traveled down the barrel, a series of side chambers would ignite additional propellant charges, accelerating the projectile to incredible speeds. The Germans called it the Hawk drug pump, or high-pressure pump, and they believed it would be their ultimate vengeance weapon, unleashing a relentless barrage on London that would force Britain to its knees. Construction was a monumental and secret undertaking. Deep in the limestone quarries of Mimoyex in northern France, thousands of forced laborers toiled to build a massive underground bunker to house this weapon. Protected by feet of reinforced concrete, the Germans were confident it was impervious to conventional bombing, but they underestimated Allied intelligence. Reconnaissance flights from the Royal Air Force noticed strange activity at the site. Puzzled analysts pieced together the clues, and the horrifying truth of the V3 project began to emerge. The Allies knew they had to act fast. On July 6, 1944, a squadron of Lancaster bombers took to the skies, but they weren't carrying regular bombs. They were armed with the Tallboy, a 5-ton earthquake bomb designed to penetrate deep underground before detonating. The raid was a success. The Tallboys slammed into the earth, creating massive shockwaves that ripped through the underground complex. The V3 supergun, a weapon designed to terrorize a nation and potentially alter the war's outcome, was crippled before it could fire a single shot at its intended target. It remains one of the most audacious engineering projects of the war, a testament to both ambition and ultimate failure. But the Germans weren't the only ones with secret tricks up their sleeves. While they focused on brute force, the Allies were mastering the art of deception with a weapon that was arguably far more clever and just as effective: the Ghost Army. This wasn't an army of soldiers in the traditional sense. Officially known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, this unique unit was composed of artists, designers, actors, and sound engineers recruited from America's top art schools. Their mission: to create illusions on an epic scale, to fool the German army into thinking Allied forces were somewhere they weren't. How did they do it? Their arsenal was made of rubber, speakers, and clever scripts. They deployed fleets of inflatable tanks, jeeps, and artillery pieces that looked astonishingly real from the air or from a distance. A handful of men could inflate an entire armored division in a matter of hours, but the visual deception was only half the story. They had sound trucks loaded with massive speakers that would blast pre-recorded audio of troop movements, tank engines, and soldier chatter, all carefully engineered to mimic the sounds of a huge military force on the move. To complete the illusion, a team of radio operators, known as spoof radio, would send out fake transmissions, perfectly replicating the communication patterns of real divisions, right down to the individual operator's fist or unique style of sending Morse code. The Ghost Army's missions were incredibly dangerous. They were often operating very close to the front lines, deliberately drawing enemy attention and artillery fire to their fake positions. Their work saved countless lives by misdirecting German forces away from actual Allied troop movements. Most notably during the critical period after the D-Day landings, they created phantom armies that tied up enemy resources and allowed real divisions to advance with less resistance. And yet, for decades, their story remained one of the war's best-kept secrets. Their operations were so highly classified that the unit was not officially recognized until 1996. Many of the men who served in this creative and courageous unit went to their graves without ever being able to tell their families what they truly did during the war. They were the masters of illusion, the unsung heroes who fought a war of wits and imagination. While the Ghost Army was deceiving the enemy on the battlefield, another secret war was being waged. A war of numbers and letters, of patterns and algorithms. This was the War of the Codebreakers, and its outcome would be just as decisive as any major battle. Deep in the English countryside, at a mansion called Bletchley Park, a group of the world's most brilliant minds gathered for a single purpose: to break the unbreakable German Enigma code. The Enigma machine was a marvel of engineering, capable of scrambling messages into billions of possible combinations. The Germans believed it was absolutely secure, but they hadn't counted on the team at Bletchley Park, a motley crew of mathematicians, linguists, and even chess champions, led by the visionary genius Alan Turing. Turing and his team developed a machine called the bomb, an electromechanical device that could rapidly test thousands of possible Enigma settings. It was the world's first programmable computer, born out of the desperate need to read the enemy's mind. When they finally broke through, the intelligence they gained was codenamed Ultra. It was the single biggest secret of the Second World War. The impact of Ultra was staggering. It allowed the Allies to see German plans almost as soon as they were made. Convoys carrying vital supplies across the Atlantic could be rerouted to avoid German U-boat wolf packs. Generals could anticipate enemy attacks and prepare counteroffensives. From the Battle of Britain to the landings in Normandy, Ultra intelligence gave the Allies a decisive edge. Historians now estimate that the work done at Bletchley Park shortened the war in Europe by at least 2 to 4 years, saving millions of lives in the process. Yet, like the Ghost Army, the Codebreakers' contributions were shrouded in secrecy for decades after the war. The Official Secrets Act bound them to silence. Alan Turing, the man who arguably did more than any other single individual to secure Allied victory, was never publicly recognized in his lifetime. His story, and the story of Bletchley Park, is a powerful reminder that some of the greatest battles are fought not with guns, but with intellect. The V3 supergun, the Ghost Army, the Bletchley Park Codebreakers. These are just a few of the incredible hidden stories of World War II. They show us that history is never just a simple narrative of good versus evil, or one battle after another. It's a complex tapestry woven with threads of ingenuity, deception, secret courage, and quiet genius. While the Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy in 1944, a completely different kind of war was raging in the Pacific. It was a war fought across vast oceans, where massive aircraft carriers were the new kings of the battlefield. And at the heart of this conflict was the Battle of Midway, a clash so pivotal it would decide the fate of nations. But what many people don't realize is just how close the United States came to losing. Fought from June 4th to 7th, 1942, the American forces were heavily outnumbered. Their carriers were still recovering from the costly Battle of the Coral Sea a month earlier. In contrast, the Japanese Navy was at the peak of its power, riding a wave of seemingly unstoppable victories across the Pacific. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind Pearl Harbor, had a new plan. He aimed to lure the remaining U.S. carriers into a trap at Midway Atoll, a key American base. His goal was simple: destroy them in one decisive battle and force America to the negotiating table. What Yamamoto didn't know was that his plan was no secret. Deep in a hot, cramped basement in Hawaii, a team of American codebreakers led by Commander Joseph Rockford had done the impossible. They had broken the Japanese naval code JN-5. This breakthrough gave Admiral Chester Nimitz, the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, a priceless advantage. He knew exactly where and when the Japanese would strike, but knowing wasn't enough. The U.S. fleet was in rough shape. The carrier USS Yorktown had been so heavily damaged at the Coral Sea that engineers said it would take 3 months to repair. Nimitz gave them 3 days. In an incredible feat of willpower and engineering, over 1,400 workers swarmed the ship, working around the clock. Just 72 hours later, the Yorktown steamed out of Pearl Harbor, with some civilian workers still on board, finishing repairs on the way to Midway. This single act of defiance would prove crucial. The American fleet, consisting of the Enterprise, Hornet, and the patched-up Yorktown, sailed to meet a far superior Japanese force. Yamamoto had deployed 4 of Japan's best carriers, the Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, all crewed by veteran pilots. On paper, the odds were overwhelmingly in Japan's favor. On the morning of June 4th, the battle began. At 6 a.m., Japan launched over 100 aircraft to bomb Midway Island. Thanks to the codebreakers, the U.S. was ready. Admiral Nimitz had positioned his carriers to ambush the Japanese fleet now. It was up to his commanders on the scene, Admirals Fletcher and Spruance, to make it happen. The initial American attacks were a disaster. The first torpedo bomber squadrons, flying obsolete TBD Devastator planes, were completely annihilated. They flew low and slow, making them easy targets for Japanese fighters. Of the 41 planes that attacked that morning, only 6 made it back. Torpedo Squadron 8 from the Hornet was wiped out, with only a single survivor. These men knew their chances were slim to none, but they pressed their attack anyway. A sacrifice that would unknowingly change the course of the battle. By late morning, things looked grim for the Americans. Not a single torpedo had hit its mark, and the Japanese carriers were preparing a devastating counterstrike. It seemed Yamamoto's plan was unfolding perfectly, but then a combination of luck, timing, and incredible courage turned the tide. The suicidal torpedo runs that pulled the Japanese fighter patrols down to sea level, leaving the carriers exposed from above. At that exact moment, American SBD Dauntless dive bombers, led by Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, finally found the Japanese fleet. They had been searching for hours, dangerously low on fuel, but McCluskey made the gut-wrenching call to press on. As they arrived, the Japanese carriers were at their most vulnerable, refueling and rearming plans on their hangar decks, which were littered with bombs and fuel lines. The American pilots pushed their planes into near-vertical dives, a maneuver they had practiced countless times. What happened next was legendary. In just 5 minutes, American bombs turned 3 of Japan's most powerful carriers, the Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, into raging infernos. The Akagi, Yamamoto's own flagship, was hit by a single bomb that set off a catastrophic chain reaction. But the fight wasn't over. The 4th Japanese carrier, the Hiryu, escaped the initial onslaught and launched a counterattack. Her planes found the Yorktown and struck it with bombs and torpedoes. Already damaged, the carrier began to list heavily, and the order was given to abandon ship. It seemed the heroic ship had finally met its end. Yet, even as the Yorktown was dying, her legacy continued. Her orphan aircraft had landed on the Enterprise. Scout planes located the Hiryu, and a final American strike was launched. At 5 p.m., dive bombers found their target, for bombs slammed into the Hiryu, and like her sister ships, she was engulfed in flames. By the end of the day, all 4 Japanese carriers were either sunk or sinking. The Imperial Japanese Navy had lost its most experienced pilots, and the myth of its invincibility was shattered. Admiral Yamamoto, who had promised a swift victory, had suffered the worst defeat in his Navy's history. He ordered a full retreat. The cost was high. Japan lost nearly 3,000 men, while the U.S. lost 307, including the brave crews of the torpedo squadrons. The USS Yorktown, despite heroic efforts to save her, was finally sunk by a Japanese submarine on June 7th, but her sacrifice had secured a victory that changed everything. Midway wasn't just a battle, it was the turning point of the Pacific War. It proved the decisive importance of intelligence, the value of bold initiative, and the power of resilience. The code breakers, the pilots, the engineers, and the sailors who fought at Midway demonstrated a level of courage and determination that overcame impossible odds. Their story is a powerful reminder of how few crucial moments and the actions of determined individuals can alter the course of history forever. World War II was not just about the epic battles we all know, like D-Day or Midway. It was a global conflict fought on countless hidden fronts by ordinary people who became extraordinary heroes. Their stories, often forgotten, are the true soul of the war. In occupied Europe, a shadow war raged. In France, the Mack was sabotaged railways and ambushed German convoys. In Norway, brave commandos destroyed a heavy water plant, crippling Germany's nuclear ambitions. And in Poland, the Home Army waged a relentless campaign of resistance, facing unimaginable brutality. At sea, it wasn't just about massive naval clashes. Thousands of merchant seamen sailed into the wolf packs of U-boats, their slow ships packed with vital supplies. Without their sacrifice, Britain would have starved, and the Eastern Front might have collapsed. They faced terrifying odds with little recognition, yet their courage kept the Allied war effort alive. In the skies over Germany, bomber crews faced a grim reality. For an American B-17 crewman, a tour of duty meant a 2 in 3 chance of being killed, wounded, or captured. Flying and freezing, unpressurized cabins, through storms of flak and swarms of enemy fighters, they pressed on, mission after agonizing mission. The psychological toll was immense, but their determination never wavered. Then there was the War of Minds. The Manhattan Project, a secret city of scientists in the New Mexico desert, raced to build the atomic bomb. This monumental scientific effort brought together the world's brightest minds to create a weapon that would end the war and change the world forever, raising ethical questions we still grapple with today. But war is more than strategy, than technology. It's about individual human stories. Consider Desmond Doss, a conscientious objector who refused to carry a gun. As a medic at the Battle of Okinawa, he single-handedly saved 75 wounded men under intense fire, lowering them one by one down a sheer cliff to safety. His incredible bravery earned him the Medal of Honor, where the Tuskegee Airmen, these African-American pilots, fought prejudice at home and enemies abroad, flying in segregated units that build the legendary combat record, never losing a single bomber they escorted. Their skill and valor helped pave the way for the desegregation of the U.S. military. Countless individual acts of heroism define this war. A soldier diving on a grenade to save his friends, a pilot crash landing his plane to avoid a village, a nurse working through an artillery barrage to tend to the wounded. These moments of selfless courage happened thousands of times in every theater of war. But with heroism came profound suffering. The Holocaust claimed 6 million Jewish lives. The siege of Leningrad starved over 1 million civilians. In China, the war had raged since 1937, with the rape of Nanking standing as a horrifying testament to the brutality of the occupation. Soviet losses were almost incomprehensible, with over 27 million dead. The atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed over 100,000 people, most of them civilians. This was the terrible human cost of the conflict. The war also acted as a crucible for technology. In 1939, air forces were still using biplanes. By 1945, jet fighters like the German Me-162 were streaking across the skies. Radar, a fledgling technology at the war's start, became a sophisticated tool that won the Battle of Britain and turned the tide at sea. Medical advances like the mass production of penicillin saved millions of lives, and early computers like Colossus, built to crack German codes, laid the groundwork for our modern digital age. For every famous general, there were thousands of ordinary soldiers whose names are lost to history. Stories like the Ghost Army, a unit of artists and engineers who used inflatable tanks and sound effects to deceive the German army, show that creativity can be as powerful as firepower. The code breakers at Bletchley Park proved that intelligence could change the course of history. These forgotten stories matter. They remind us of the true nature of war, a tapestry of individual choices made under impossible pressure, a mix of courage and fear, nobility and brutality. They remind us of the terrible cost of conflict, not in abstract numbers, but in real human lives torn apart. The generation that fought this war is nearly gone. Soon, there will be no one left with a first-hand memory. That makes it our duty to remember, not to glorify war, but to honor the sacrifices made, to understand the true cost, and to learn the lessons they paid so dearly to teach us. By uncovering these hidden chapters, we gain a deeper appreciation for the courage of those who fought and the world they shaped. Their stories are a testament to the human spirit, and a warning we must never forget. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life. Join us next time as we explore more untold stories of courage, sacrifice, and determination that deserve to be remembered.